MSI is officially over. We have a champion. Spoiler alert. RNG take the victory. This is Clown Fiesta Podcast, episode 43 with Blue Jay and JNT 250. Pretty good final, I'll say. Right, JNT? Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought the final was great. I thought the semifinal series were good for the most part. Um, we'll get into all the series. Let's start off with semis. RNG and PSG is where we started on the Friday series. Give me some initial thoughts of that one.
It was not exactly how I was expecting the series to go, mainly because when I made my prediction last week about the series, I thought it was going to be straight up schlacking or a schlappen, and it wasn't so much. I think it was definitely a closer series than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
I thought PSG was a formidable opponent. I continued to underrate them just slightly. Um, they showed up one game and just kind of they had a really I forgot it was game 2 or game 3. But I thought they played pretty well for the most part. I don't think, like I've mentioned before, I don't think any of their players like there's like a big weakness on their team in terms of the individual skill of one of their players. They all match up very well against the rest of the competition at this tournament, and their team play has been very good. So it was a good series. We saw PSG Talent take a game off RNG. All the more impressive because RNG continued to look so good.
Very competitive series is what I would say. For a 3-1, it could have easily been a 3-2, I would say, with how good and competitive the series was. And I would agree with you a little bit as well in saying that like I underrated them as well. But I would say I underrated them a little bit more in the earlier stages of the tournament. As the tournament went on, I started to realize like this team is actually for real. And I think they ended the tournament for me having no doubt in my mind that they are the third best team in the tournament. I think that they are just better than Mad Lions right now. And I can't believe I'm saying that because I think coming in, I would have been really surprised if I would have heard anyone say that. And so, really got to give props to PSG for showing up and playing so many competitive games over and over and over again. And maybe there's some bias coming from a North American perspective, seeing as Cloud9, that was the only team Cloud9 couldn't beat, as we mentioned last week. But yeah, I just thought this team looked really, really good. And as you mentioned, there's no obvious hole in their lineup that you can exploit. If you were to point somewhere, you would probably point top lane, but I wouldn't say Hanabi is a hole in their lineup. I would say he's good, and the other players are just a little bit better, is how I
Yeah.
would classify it.
Yeah, I know. Coming into the tournament, I had a very high opinion of PSG Talent because they stomped their region so hard. And going into the initial group stage with Mad Lions and Istanbul Wildcats and Pain Gaming, I did think that PSG was going to be better than Mad Lions, but I kind of fell off them a little bit after their two performances against Mad Lions, and even then their initial Rumble stage games where uh, they lost to Mad Lions. They didn't look so great against Damwon after having such a big lead. And then basically from the second round robin of the Rumble stage and beyond, they just continue to get better and better. But I think
Yeah,
coming into it, I recognized that PSG Talon was a good team, but I didn't like fully commit to that once I saw their group stage performance when they dropped 2 games to Mad Lions, and it looked like Mad Lions was the clear number one out of that group.
okay, and since we've said, so I agree. And since we both said that there's no real holes in this lineup, I guess I want to go with on the other end, who's the best performer in this lineup for maybe the whole tournament or maybe for just this series? Who do you think it was?
If I were to pick this series, I think I'd probably have to go with Maple. And if I would have to go with the whole tournament, I'm still very high on River, so I think I'll go with River over
Ooh,
Doggo, even though I think the
that's so
majority of the people
interesting.
will go with Doggo.
So that's so interesting to because for me it's between Doggo and Kaiwing for the whole tournament, but I definitely agree with you that this series I go with Maple. His Silas was really really good. And I have to admit that like it's a lot easier to look good on Silas when you're playing it into Gnar because well you don't need to be Mega Gnar to use the ultimate. You just go in forehead and use Mega Gnar or use Gnar rather. So I mean that's something that if you want to take away some points, sure, but I don't think that's totally fair because he looked really good on the Silas, and yeah, I don't know, he just popped off on that champion, and I think he was their best performer in this series, and it's crazy to see because Maple's a guy that's been around for so long. Um, there's a lot of talk about how players that are around for this long start to fall off in skill level, and I think that there's some validity to that. This wasn't the case with him. He had such a good showing in that series, and I think that he was a big part in why the series was competitive.
Yeah, I thought in game one, think most people were really caught off guard by the Azir pick because Azir had like really fallen off in the meta and nobody's been playing him since like if we're talking LCS here, like nobody's been playing Azir since like week 4 of LCS basically. But we even mentioned at the start
Yeah,
of
we
this
did.
tournament that Azir was Maple's best champion throughout the entirety of the PCS in the spring and even in the spring playoffs. Had a 100% win rate on the champion, and I think still did a really good job in the early portion of that game 1. Ultimately, things kind of fell apart elsewhere, but Maple was doing a great job in the early laning phase, getting a CS lead up against Cryon, coordinating mid lane ganks with River. We saw the Stream of Shuffle go off like 2 times in mid lane for 2 kills.
They got black shielded a couple times as
Yeah,
well. I mean,
later on into the game, I think PSG's draft got like really exposed specifically because they picked so many champions that are just trash bags into Morgana, and you did see that Black Shield get a ton of value the later the game went, and I think the draft was ultimately what kind of like cursed PSG in that first game because you could just tell it reached a certain point to the game where PSG literally was not able to do a single thing against RNG's comp. They couldn't contest objectives. They couldn't step up revision. They couldn't start any of the skirmishes. But back to Maple, he played really, really well. His Silas was really good in both Game 2 and Game 4, even in the one that they lost. However, I will bring this up because I mentioned it last week, and there was a ton of it going on this week. People are just like R5 picking Victor into Silas, and I seriously
ugh.
don't understand why that is happening. Like,
I don't. So I agree with you. I do fully agree with you. I am more just cold on Victor altogether. I don't think that champion is that good, man. I just don't.
I think Victor is good when it's a control mage v control mage matchup because he gets the time to basically free farm the lane and scale up, and Victor is able to go like this much greedier build path where he goes tier and goes like a second or third item Seraphs because Nemesis has mentioned it a ton over like this entirety of MSI. A lot of the victors at MSI have not been going early tier because in a lot of the lane states they're up against a more battle mage like a Silas or even like an AD assassin type champion, whether it's like a Lucian or even in a bunch of the PSG talent like Chaz or whatever. He was playing like a bunch of fun AD mids, and you really have to like itemize more defensive or more like you're basically like dealing with less gold because you're not able to play so freely in the lane. And it just feels like whenever Victor is not up against a control mage, this champion just feels really, really useless. And specifically into Silas, you're just giving him like a really powerful ult to steal in the lane phase. And more often than not, like Silas Victor ulti is doing more than your own Victor ulti.
Yeah, and I would just say that even the advantages that you get in lane sometimes with a Victor is not enough. Okay, you see what series was it? It would have been in the Mad series because I think it was Humanoid against Showmaker. I think it was the Lucian into the Akali. Uh, that's what a mid diff. That's what you want to do when you get a counter pick. He absolutely smashed him, and we'll get to that later. I don't think you can really do that with the Victor, and I don't think you get enough out of him later in the team fights for these small advantages that you might get yourself. But yeah, anyways, I completely agree with you, just in different ways that like I'm not a huge fan of the Victor. I do want to talk about RNG though, because this team just looks good everywhere. Like we talked about how Kai Wing and Doggo look great in the bot lane. Well, Gala and Ming look a little bit better, right? And
Yeah.
they looked good. I want to say pretty much the whole tournament. There was a few uh, sloppy plays, perhaps I guess you could say, but very very few. And time again, Gala is popping off and Ming is finding the engage, whether it be Nautilus, whether it be Leon, whatever, man. Like they're just good, and I think right now there's no way that they're not the best bot lane in the world after what we saw this tournament.
Yeah, I think sort of Gala especially had a bit of a slow start in terms of like the spotlight was mainly on the top side of the map for RNG in the group stage and towards the start of the Rumble stage. But we did see RNG do a bit of a flip in terms of their like dynamic of playstyle where they were doing like heavy stuff top lane with Zhao Hu picking these early aggressive champs like the Jace, like the Lucian, and pretty much just having Wei camp top lane for the first 10 minutes of the game. And we're kind of seeing a bit of the reverse to where they weren't, focusing so much on the top side of the map, and we saw a ton of bot side focus in both the semifinals and in the finals in terms of just aggression in the lane and having Wei come down and like call for some big bangers.
I just thought of something that I misspoke with. Some people are probably listening, going, Lucian into Akali, isn't that the RNG versus Damwon series? And it was. It was not Mad Lions. I just
Oh,
realized that now. But I guess it was crying that I need to give the credit for the Lucian gameplay. I was thinking about it, I was like, I don't remember humanoid. I feel like I would have remembered that. But anyway, sorry to cut in there. I just realized that I made a mistake. I want to talk a little bit about Wei, not because I thought he was awful, but I want more out of him. And it's not that he's not bad. He actually had a really good tournament. I just think it's really unfortunate that a guy that I was so excited to watch played Udyr like the whole damn tournament.
Yeah.
Like, it's not his fault at all. He actually played a really good Udyr. I want more. And so
Yeah.
I guess I hope to see him at Worlds.
Yeah, I mean, people kind of recognized the longer the tournament went on, that Udyr was still just the best jungler in the meta. And I think
Yeah.
depending on the way you want to draft, either Udyr or Morgana is the best champion in the meta. I think they're both like 1A and 1B in terms of top junglers. If you want to play a much more, passive lane style with your mid lane picks, if you want to go more of a control mage route, and if you want to go for more of like a tank engage route in the top lane, like a Gnar, we saw a lot of Udyr and Gnar paired, and we saw a ton of Udyr and control mages paired. Whereas you look on the flip side with Morgana, I was really liking it when teams were picking Morgana with a playmaking champion in the top lane or in the mid lane. I really wasn't a fan of seeing a lot of Morgana jungle picks paired with a control mage, because it felt like, should you fall behind in the early game or should your mid laner fall behind, it becomes really difficult to make plays around the map when Morgana just becomes reliant on hitting a bind to basically do anything. And I think we did see that with Wei a little bit in the PSG Talon series, because it just felt that like he wasn't doing a whole lot throughout the entirety of the game other than black shielding priority targets and hitting the occasional bind. Whereas I think in the RNG series, when he was put on the Udyr and we saw a lot of, early and aggressive stuff from him, that is the style that I much preferred him on.
Yeah, I honestly thought that we would see more Morgana with your point and click CCs, like the classic like Renekton Nidalee. I thought it was maybe going to be the Renekton Morgana kind of stuff where you chain the CC. But honestly, I actually do kind of agree with you that you are, maybe hoping isn't the right word, but relying perhaps on a Morgana binding landing. But it does happen a fair bit, and that CC is actually so good that I actually, and her clear is just great, that I do actually value the Morgana just as highly as the Udyr, as you mentioned. They're both very, very good picks right now. And again, I don't blame him at all for playing Udyr. That's not what I'm doing here, guys. He was very hyped. I mentioned many times that I was really excited to see him pop off. And while he had a great tournament, and I think he played well just about every game, it still kind of sucked to see, such a good and hyped player be put on an Udyr. But I mean, that you're gonna get that, right? That's just the way League of Legends works. You could argue that Blabber played a bunch of Udyr. You could argue that about anyone in the tournament almost.
Yeah, we kind of got a bit spoiled because of how hard Wei was popping off in the group stage and in the early phases of the Rumble stage, and then he kind of just played a more passive role. But I think the way that RNG changed up their style was warranted, and obviously it was successful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they played great. And the other guy I just want to mention is Zhao, who I cannot believe this guy is role swapped. He doesn't look out of place at all. I don't want to touch too much on Zhao because it's sort of similar to what we talked about last week. But just, my God, this guy, he plays a lot of different stuff up there, and he plays it all well. He doesn't seem like he's new to any of this. And I guess that's just what you get out of a veteran player, right? Role swapping just isn't that hard for some people. And yeah, I guess he's one of them. Let's hop over to the DK Mad series. Are you ready to do that?
Yeah, I'll give a little honorable mention to Doggo, who almost like 1v9 the last team fight in that game 4, where he had
God, man.
the play where he like jumped behind the 3 people, threw the Tristana E on him, and like insta-procced it, ulted them all to the back of the wall, and then they live with like 2 HP, and
I'm actually really glad you brought that up.
He almost won the game for them.
I wanted to talk about that play, so I almost completely forgot about it. That is probably one of the best almost made it plays I've ever seen. That was like, there was no way anyone is expecting him to jump back in there. And he almost, if he would have gotten the pentakill, I would have lost my mind. I was so incredibly impressed by a play that he ultimately ended up dying. Yeah, that was like, yeah, it's weird because I'm so excited for a play where he just died and then they ended up not really getting much off of it. But yeah, that play was actually sick, and he deserves a shout out for it, definitely.
All right, DK Mad.
Yeah, you want me to start or you want to start?
Go ahead.
Okay, so we mentioned a lot last week, and I don't think we were the only ones to talk about this, but we talked about how we were worried for the mid lane matchup. And Humanoid actually did get, I think, maybe 2 solo kills on Showmaker. Is that correct? Did he get 2 or did he get 1?
I don't know
I
the
know he got
exact
1 on the
number,
Zoe and
but I
there
thought
was
Humanade
Zoe
just
into
played
the.
really well that whole series. Like
I see. I actually don't think so. I thought he
I
had a
th-
couple of nice plays where he outplayed Showmaker, but I think most of the game, like outside of lane, I thought that Showmaker just hard gapped him and is just way more valuable. That's not even any shade to Humanoid. We've made it very clear what we think about Showmaker. He's freaking good, man. And even though he had a couple of mistakes and died solo, maybe it was once, I think it was twice, but maybe it was once. It doesn't matter. Even if he had a couple of mistakes to Humanoid, I give props to Humanoid, but I just think he was still gapped in this series, and I thought that, I mean, you got way more out of Showmaker, but I mean, big surprise, right?
I don't know. I thought Humanoid played pretty well considering my expectations going into it. I thought he actually did a pretty admirable job in lane. I think people will point to that like game 4 performance where his KDA was looking really shit. But I actually think he played laning phase out really well. Like I thought this was going to be another game where I'm going to have to bring up like last picking Victor into Silas again. But the one game that I actually thought the Humanoid played really well was that game 4 in laning phase because he was actually doing a lot of work in Showmaker. Got a solo kill on him, pushed him out of lane phase multiple times, was pretty much juking like every Silasy, and it kind of felt like that was the only way that you need to win this matchup is like if you can dodge the Silasy, you can win, but once you get hit by a Silasy, you either insta die or have to burn your flash.
So I think that that's fair, and so I think we're actually more on the same page than I initially thought, because like I said, I think the gap came after laning phase. Like I actually didn't think that he had any problems in lane whatsoever, or maybe a little bit, but not that I can remember at least. But I noticed a lot of dying later on, and then Showmaker just cleaning up kills left, right, and
Yeah.
center. Again, it's not really any shade towards Humanoid. Showmaker's just really good, guys. And you mentioned last week he doesn't miss any skill shots. We saw that.
Yeah.
We saw, I mean, outside of the Yone LT.
Yeah. Yeah.
Outplayed. But yeah, no, I do think that his laning phase, he had a good series with it. But again, I don't think Humanoid is a top tier LEC mid laner like some people have suggested, or maybe they've suggested that he's just below. I don't know if I would put him there either. But again, it's not like he's. I don't think he's a bottom tier LEC player. Yeah, I just think there's some room for him to grow, and he got outplayed by one of the best players in the world right now, maybe the best, depending on who you ask.
It's hard to say because, well, I mean, I don't think it's hard to say. I think he is, but we haven't seen Chovy in a while, and as some people know, I'm a big Humble Life guy, and Chovy
That's
is.
the classic debate, and I think that it's a fair debate to have because Showmaker does have the better teammates. Clearly, he's got the better team to play with. But
I don't know. Some of his teammates are doing some questionable things.
True. Let's get into that because my God, what happened, man? What? Okay, so they should be the better teammates. Beryl struggled a lot this tournament, and I will say in this series, I thought Khan struggled a lot. He did. Was it this series where he had one really good Lee Sin game? It might have been the finals. He did have one really good Lee Sin game over the weekend, so I don't want to take that away from Khan.
He
but
had
there was one game where he was so heavy.
It was
Narg.
He had a good Lee Sin game 4 in the series. I don't know if that's the one you're thinking of.
I don't remember because there's just too many games, man. But I know that there was one game where he got hard gapped on Gnar and he was absolutely useless. Do you remember I messaged you or we ended up talking about it at some point? I was blown away with how useless Khan was in one of the games. It was like, wow. Because like Khan is like, this is a well-established player, guys. This guy's been around for a long time and he's been very good. And I will say his Scion is still great, but he had a really, really poor Gnar performance in one game where I couldn't figure out what he was doing.
Yeah, I thought, as you kind of mentioned, like Khan and Beryl were the two people on Damwon who were really struggling, both in, in this semifinal series. I think Ghost, while he didn't look amazing in this series, I do think it was a bit of a byproduct of Beryl running it down a bunch. I still think Ghost, despite him getting memed on a little bit in this series, played pretty well for the most part. He really hard entered that game too.
Yes.
Early on, but he actually did a somewhat decent job of getting back into the game, and obviously, he was kind of just like picking up kills left and right. But he was pretty relevant come late game. But I think past the laning phase, that was kind of way more about Carzzy playing really, really insane on the Xayah than like Ghost running it down.
Yeah, no, I actually agree. I thought he actually had a good series, but he had one really bad game where he was
Yeah,
absolutely running
he
it down.
died like
But
4 times in a row in 10 minutes.
I would say, with that said, you still need to give credit to the Mad Bot lane because they owned them in this
Oh
series
yeah,
for the
I
most
think
part, right?
Karzi and Kaiser had a really
In
great
lane,
series.
right? Yeah, they did, and so I was really happy for them. I think that that was one of the areas where I think I've seen a lot of LEC fans in Twitch chat, specifically during Hotline League and whatnot, where I've seen people that they weren't so confident in the abilities of the Mad Bot lane, and I thought that they had a pretty good tournament, and so I was really happy to see them have solid performances and have a really good series.
Yeah, it was kind of the direction that I saw this series going in, was that should Mad Lions be able to get some sort of a lead, specifically I was referencing to the bot lane, I think Karzi and Kaiser do a really great job of pushing that lead to the limit and, you know, extending it even further. And we really did see in that game too, where like from the initial overstep of Ghost and Barrel, they were constantly doing like they were constantly, you know, tracking summoners properly, going in on the priority targets, and just doing a really great job. Like pretty much, it felt like there was a 2v2 kill almost every single game in this series, whether it
Yeah, it
was
did.
DK's bottom or whether it was Mad Lions bottom lane. It just felt like somebody. Once the game had hit 5 minutes, there usually was a death in the bot lane at some point.
Yeah, I do think, and I know I'm kind of piling on Barrel here, but I do think most of it was Barrel outside of that one game, outside of the, I think it was game two. I could be wrong,
It was
but
game two
outside
where
of the one
Ghost ran it.
where Ghost was absolutely running it down, I think most of the errors were from Barrel engaging, thinking that they won the 2v2 fights where like Kaiser would just turn around on Leona and be like, "Nope, you can't kill
Yeah.
me because I'm Leona." Like that would happen far more often than it should. You would think that Barrel would kind of learn that lesson or at least know these matchups or something, but yeah, it definitely didn't look too great from the bot lane of Damwon, and I do think that it's only fair to group Ghost and Barrel at least a little bit, even if it is more on one guy than the other.
Mm-hmm. Because like there's got to be some community. Like it's not like, I mean, surely
Yes.
it's not like Barrel just like, I'm going in, good luck, or it's like, you know, they think they can fight. And you know, credit to Mad Lions, because the majority of the time on the Mad Lions side of things, it was them turning around and engage from Barrel. And I think, you know, part of that was like specifically in the game 2 and the game 3, where they had the champions like Leona and Braum who do a really great job of turning around flubbed engages and have generally lower cooldowns than these other hard engage supports. And I think, as you mentioned, you know, Mad Lions did a great job of recognizing that, you know, they can turn this and they can punish these plays. And you know, that was one of the reasons why we saw so many kills in the bot lane.
Yeah, and another thing that I want to point out, because this was not necessarily the bot lane's fault per se, but it was something that happened in the bot lane, was there was a moment in it was a game that Armut was playing Wukong, which I know that sounds like it doesn't narrow it down a lot, but I think he only played one Wukong game in that
It was
series,
game
right?
3.
Where Damwon just really overextends in the bot lane, not respecting that Armut has TP on the Wukong and that Khan does not have TP and can't follow. Now, this is something that you need to know at this level, and I fully expect out of Damwon, you need to be calling who has TP advantage, and you should know whether you're overextending or not overextending when you're trying to engage that fight. They end up over engaging. Armut TP's down, does what he does best, ulties all three of them. They pick up 3 kills, and it's just an absolute disaster for Damwon. And that's something that to me is totally outside of lane. That is just poor macro. You could blame the team for not listening. Maybe Khan is saying, guys, I can't follow TP. He has TP, and they're just like, whatever. Let's try to engage anyways. Or maybe Khan is just not tracking the TPs properly. I don't know, but I do know that there's some poor macro there, and like that's something that you just can't let happen. That's something that I would not have expected to see out of Damwon.
Yeah.
What's so funny?
Well, it
What are
just
you
like,
talking
I don't know,
about?
just the way you said it was funny. Yeah. It
What were
did
you gonna
feel.
say?
No, I just thought it was funny, but it did feel though like in this series, there was a lot of how do I put? There's a lot of limit testing in the series. It felt like game 1 specifically, I thought was like there was like so much shit going on around the map early game, in the mid lane, in the top lane. I thought like a lot of this series was, you know, teams trying to limit test against each other, and that's why I think we saw a lot of like solo kills, which I was pretty surprised about, considering when you have a team that's as good as Damwon and players as good, you know, that Damwon has, you know, we thought, well, they are good players, even though that they had, you know, a bad series. But Mad Lions was doing a great job of just like putting it on them. Like they didn't back down to the challenge, and that was one thing that I really didn't see coming out of Mad Lions, was that if they were going to go for a lot of plays, I did think that it would be maybe on the top side of the map specifically, because I thought that was the one place that was probably most exploitable. But it did feel like that Mad Lions was kind of matching them blow for blow. And, at a point, it did really kind of crumble, or specifically in that game 4, because Mad Lions did actually have a decent early game lead in that game. But we did see one TP play from Showmaker on the Silas basically turn that whole game around. And he picks up 3 free kills. And as we were mentioning, Humanoid was actually playing the lane really well. But, like, you're giving Silas 3 free kills, and the game was pretty much over from there. And you saw in that game 4 and game 5, you could kind of tell that, like, once Damwon got those leads initially, you kind of knew it was over. Like, you just got the feeling. Like, I don't know, maybe other people didn't, but I got the feeling, like, once Showmaker turned that gank around, got that 3 for 0, I was like, this game's over. And then in game 5, just the way that things transpired in the early game, Khan had a really great game on the Jace. Showmaker was just as good as ever on the Zoe. It just felt like they were simply getting outplayed. But I think Mad did a really great job in those first 3 games, matching Damwon blow for blow.
So I actually want to know, I want to ask you, but I also want to ask the live chat or YouTube, in the YouTube comments. I want people's opinions on this, as long as they're respectful. Sometimes people just like to hard flame. But I want to know what people thought about how close this series was for a 3-2. And the reason I bring that up is because for me, you know how we talk about very close 3-0s or very not close 3-2s? To me, this didn't feel like that close of a 3-2. Maybe I'm just so biased because, again, you and I have said many times that we just thought Damwon was going to win this whole thing. Maybe I was just so biased that, like, I had it preconceived in my head that Damwon was just winning this series. But never throughout the whole series, even when they were down 2-1, I still felt really confident that Damwon was just going to win the series. And maybe that's just because, I don't know, in their wins, they just absolutely smacked them. For the most part, I think all 3 of their wins were pretty quick wins. I want to know if I was the only one that felt this way. Maybe it felt really close to other people. Maybe it didn't, but I'd like to know what people think about it. Anyways, what did you think about that?
I did. It's hard to say because it wasn't like a super close 3-2 like the MSI finals were, but I would say it was still a relatively close series. In terms of like the 2 games Mad Lions won. Like if it was, I don't even know how to put this, but like the 3 Damwon wins, were, as I just checked, 25 minutes, 22 minutes, and 23 minutes. And then the 2 Mad Lions wins were like 30 plus minutes. One of them was like 35 minutes. But it did feel like in those 3 Damwon wins, it was pretty clear cut in terms of they were the better team. But in the 2 Mad Lions wins, it wasn't that like Mad Lions completely stomped them start to finish. They were much closer games, and I do feel like even in the early games of the Damwon wins, it wasn't like Mad Lions was completely rolling over and had no chance to begin with, because I did think in basically every single game, the early game was pretty close. And there were like those certain moments in games 1, 4, and 5 that Damwon were really just able to turn into their favor. And that was kind of like the switch that flipped for like the huge snowball that happened. So to me, it didn't feel like it was like a not close 3-2, because I thought the early games in pretty much every single game were pretty competitive.
Yeah, and for me, so I guess the way I look at it was the Damwon losses felt like a little bit of Mad Lions playing really well and a little bit of Damwon kind of running it down. And the Damwon wins just felt like Damwon just rolling over them. And again, maybe my bias is getting in the way because of how good I perceive this team being. So yeah, it was just something that I was curious if other people felt that way or not. Regardless, I still think Mad Lions is a good team. I don't think that they're I didn't think I even said throughout the whole tournament I always felt like they still had a shot of winning the tournament. But yeah, I just it didn't feel that close to me, and I'm wondering why it felt that way. Maybe it was just a weird tournament for me, or a weird series rather. I want to talk a little bit about El Yoya. I thought he looked great. I thought he had a really good tournament. Is this guy a rookie?
Yep.
Doesn't feel like it, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm really, really impressed with him. He's going to be a guy that I have my eye on watching the LEC this summer. I'm really excited for him. And I mean, also Armut. You guys know what I think about Armut. I fucking love that guy. That guy's sick. Armut, baby, with the Wukong. I love it. Yeah, I just like this team, and I hope they get better, and I hope we see them at Worlds again.
I agree.
Yeah. Anything else on this series? Should we go to finals?
Finals.
RNG versus Damwon in the finals. RNG takes the series. JNT, I have a very serious question to ask you. Was this a private jet diff?
Yes.
Yes.
They got in everybody's heads when like the tournament hadn't even started and they're posting on social media that they flew in a private jet.
So I just found this out maybe today or yesterday. I found this out really recently that they flew a private jet there. That's just something that to me, if I'm being honest, guys, I do not think that had any impact on the series whatsoever. Just
It's
so people
mental
know,
edge.
I'm just trolling a little bit here, but that to me is fascinating. Like, damn, like that's when you know you made it. You know, once your team's like, we got to fly these guys out private. Let's get serious though. They had a really good series, and again, similar to the Mad and DK series, I was worried about mid lane, and I mentioned earlier how there was a really good Lucian game out of Cryan, and he absolutely smashed Showmaker on the Akali. Now that lane should be Lucian favored, but guys, he Flame Horizoned him,
He was
and he was
smacking
up
him
like
around.
he was up like 30 CS at 10 minutes. Like
He was
he
almost
he
double
really
CS like early on in the game.
that is the advantage that you want to get out of Illusion when you're playing against Akali. And it's not just anybody's Akali, it's Showmaker's Akali, which, by the way, he still did have a pretty good game later on. He missed a couple small things in team fights that I thought he could have played a little bit better, but Showmaker still had a really good Akali, and Cryan was outperforming him. He actually mid-gapped him in that game pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, were you not worried about that?
Oh no,
I definitely was.
I thought it. Well, I wasn't as worried as I was for the previous series, mainly because Cryan has been this sort of control mage player in the mid lane, and there's not. Man, I am not trying to sound like I'm not trying to rag on Showmaker here, but like there's not a ton of advantages you can gain in a control mage v control mage matchup, and so that was part of the reason why I didn't think that mid was going to be that big of an issue, because like if they're going to be playing like Victor Oriana or like these kinds of matchups for the entire series, which is what I thought it was going to be, or like Zoe Syndra or what have you, I didn't think that Cryan was going to like be completely starved out of the game. So I wasn't too worried about it, but I did think that Cryan really showed up in this series. I thought he had a really great series. I thought, kind of mentioned this before, Gala had a really great series, but as you said, bit of a mid gap in game one.
Gala was absolutely insane, man. And again, he was like that pretty much the whole tournament, though. It got to I heard some people say like you can't keep giving this guy Kaisa, and I do agree with that to a certain extent. But it's not like he wasn't able to perform on Tristana. He was just as good on Tristana the whole tournament as well. And you have only so many bans, right? Like
Yeah,
especially
well,
after Cryan pops off on Lucian, you probably need to ban a Lucian, and you probably need to ban Senna or Tom Kench. Like there's just so many bans that you need, and so I'm never a huge. I don't mind the you should ban X argument. I just you should ban X instead of Y is what you need to say, because it's not, oh, just ban it forehead. You only have a certain amount of bans, right?
yeah, I mean, I didn't like that whole argument to begin with, because the argument was like Kaisa is Gala's best champion. You should ban that. Well, Kaisa was everybody's best champion because Kaisa is the best champion. And if you give the best player the best champion, it's kind of what happens. So like you go back, you basically look at all the 80 carries that were in this tournament to begin with, or we look at a bunch of their stats. Like Kaisa was pretty much the most played and highest win rate champ for almost all of these players. You talk about Cloud9, Kaisa was Ven's best champion. Talk about Mad Lions, Kaisa was Karzi's best champion. Look at Ghost, Kaisa was his best champion. Like it's not a surprise that Kaisa is the best
Yeah.
80 carry in the meta right now. And if you give that to such a skillful player like Gala, that's kind of what's going to happen. So in terms of like if you wanted to ban the Kaisa to you drop Kaisa for like the Senna ban or something, so you let Senna through. Like I don't think that's a good idea either. Like giving Senna, who I would
Yeah.
actually argue is like it's similar to Udyr and Morgana. It's like the 1A, 1B in terms of best 80 carries. It's just a different play style. I don't want to do either of that, and I think it would be actually a mistake to be using 2 AD bans of the first 3 bans in like a draft phase. If you're like the red side team, for example, I do not think you should be banning 2 ADs on red side.
And a big part of it is that you are trading it for the Tristana, right? Which happens all the time, guys. Like that's something that's very common. Like, oh, we're giving up an OP but getting an OP. Like, because
Mm-hmm.
people are, and people will probably say that Tristana is a little bit below Kaisa, but that's just how drafts work sometimes. It's yeah. So that's why I'm not a huge fan of the just ban this forehead. Like guys, I'm sure they've thought about it. I'm sure they've done their draft prep on what they want to do, and I'm sure they know a hell of a lot more than you or me about what bans they should do.
Yeah.
They have scrim information, we don't. So yeah, I'm just not a huge fan of the just ban it forehead without saying what you got to leave open. So, anyways, yeah, Gala looks really good on Tristana and Kaisa, and probably the Senna if it was left open. So it's not like you have a lot of options there.
Mm-hmm. I think no matter what the guy was playing, he was going to play well.
Yeah, and I know we talked a little bit about Showmaker, but to me, I was so happy to see him lock in the Xerath. I thought that was sick. I thought he had a great game. A couple of mechanical mistakes. I will not pretend I
Oh,
didn't see him
yeah.
shoot a Q backwards. But that
Mm-hmm.
was, dude, like no one else pulls out Xerath in a final like that. Like, let's go, man. I loved it.
Yeah, I didn't think. Well, I was a little bit nervous just because of what he was kind of picking it into and what the RNG comp kind of became. Like, he was playing against like Udyr, Kaisa, Rel, and Orianna, a lot of champions that do have a lot of like dive and wombo combo kind of enablers. But I think Showmaker, he did a pretty solid job in lane phase. Didn't do a whole lot, and then just became your staple artillery mage, pumping DPS from the back.
So I'll tell you why I wasn't nervous for him when I saw him lock that in, and I was very excited. It's because you convinced me, JNT. You just told me, and I think you're absolutely right, that he just doesn't miss skill shots. He's actually like, it's such a rare thing to say, like this guy just hits a bunch of skill shots, but he does, and that's what you want to do with Xerath, and he sure did in that game, and he looked very good. The only time I got nervous is when I saw him throw that Q backwards. I was like, uh-oh. But then after that, he took over the game and looked really,
the
really good on
scripts
it.
the
So,
scripts
I mean,
bugged
yeah.
out and he shot the Q
Yeah,
backwards.
yeah, true. Xerath is one of those champions that's really popular for scripting, right? There's like the Lulu Cog script that you see, or Yumi Cog, and then Xerath is
Yeah.
another one that you see. But anyways, that we don't need to get into that. Um, I mentioned how Khan had probably a rough weekend, I would say overall, but that doesn't mean he didn't have some good performances. This was I have it in my notes here. This was the series where he had a really good Lee Sin game. Game 2.
Yep.
Absolutely popping off, making so many plays on the Lee Sin. I was really, really impressed. A little bit disappointed with how bad he was in some of the other games over the weekend, but you got to give credit where it's due. And he was, to me, he was the reason they actually won that game. No, ahead of Showmaker. So I would say that Khan was the reason they won game 2 more than Showmaker on the
Oh,
Xerath.
yeah, I agree. I don't think Xerath was like the reason they won. I think the pick just kind of
Yeah.
like ended up being so perfect in the way that the game played out because there was so much chaos going on, or basically there was a lot of chaos everywhere other than mid lane, and Xerath can literally just like walk into Fog of War and just shoot his ultimates over the whole map and pick up assists and deal damage. So I thought it was kind of like the perfect game. But like you mentioned, Khan was making a bunch of plays in that game on the Lee Sin.
Yeah, and one last specific Damwon player that I wanted to talk about in this series was Beryl, about specifically on the Thresh, because we mentioned how Beryl looked a little bit out of place pretty much the whole tournament. Honestly, he didn't look like himself. Like we saw Beryl at Worlds last year, he was amazing,
Mm-hmm.
and we saw him struggle. But I will say, I thought his Thresh was really good. Again, another outlier. Whereas, like, I thought Khan had a pretty weak tournament, more towards the end. But he still had that really good Lee Sin game. I think the same thing with Beryl as far as his Thresh is concerned. He looked really good on it, and I thought that was a pick where he seemed more comfortable. But we didn't see much of the Thresh throughout the whole tournament. I think we just saw that one game.
Yeah, I was expecting a little more of a diverse champion pool, or like champion, yeah, like pool for the meta for support. I did think we were gonna see a lot more Braum, and like that was, I know, remember even before MSI started, that was a pick that I really thought was gonna like increase in traction after it had sort of picked up a little bit of play towards the end of most of the regional playoffs, and we did see a little bit of Braum in this tournament, and I think the games that we saw,
We
it
saw
performed.
Kaiser play it, right?
Yeah, that
Was
was
it?
in.
How many games did we see? Was it just one, or
It was
am I
just
forgetting something?
one in that Mad DK series, and there was only like a couple of Braum games throughout the entire tournament. But I think every time that we saw it, I thought it was really, really good, and I'll be surprised if we don't see more of that champion because I do think it is really good, and I think like some of the support champions in the meta right now are getting a couple more nerfs. So I did think that we were going to see more of the Braum, of the Thresh, and I think he did have a pretty solid game in game 3 on the
There was a
Thresh.
game There was a game, and it might have been Mad Lions DK. So, again, I can't remember. There's just too many games. But there was a game where someone invaded Morgana and Braum on the same team,
That was on
and like
that was in the PSG
level one.
RNG series.
Okay, like that's such a
Yeah.
good level 1.
Yeah,
And
I
mind you,
think
they
it
didn't
was.
with Nautilus is a really good level 1 champion. I don't want to dismiss that. But it's very rare that you see people invade on a Braum and Morgana on the same team. Them two, along with Nautilus, who was on the other team, to be fair, are probably like 3 of the strongest level 1 champions in the game. Maybe the 3 best. I mean,
Well,
there's
for
150 of them.
support, yeah.
But like, damn, I was like, and it didn't go well for them. But anyways,
Yeah, it did
that's
not.
besides the point. Last thing I want to mention for this series for me is RNG's decision making. Specifically, I think it was game 1. Correct. I apologize if it wasn't game 1, but it was right after an Elder fight. It was an Elder fight. There was no clear takeaway of who won the fight, so it was like get back on the map and reset ASAP. And they just rushed Baron, and I think that's like such a bold call to make to try to catch a team off guard and just rush Baron in a MSI final. And they did that, and I just thought that's somewhere where, like, look, RNG has a clear idea that they want to be aggressive and force Damwon to answer to them. And Damwon wasn't able to answer quick enough, and they ended up getting a Baron and just winning the game off that after Damwon started to change the game and turn it a little bit more in their direction. And so I really thought RNG deserved praise for that Baron rush that I think was in game 1. Yeah, they just have really good macro, really good decision making. They're not afraid to take a risk, and it paid off. So I got to give props.
Yeah, I think that's part of the trial by fire that you get in the LPL, is because a lot of these games kind of in the LPL are decided basically off of one, team fight, one decision that teams kind of go for. And I think that's probably something that you'll naturally gain from being in the LPL. I think it is a little bit more methodical in the LCK. And I think, as you mentioned, these sort of snap decisions are more impactful in the LPL. And I think we'll see a lot of that from we'll see a lot more of that from RNG and from probably all the other teams that attend Worlds later on in the year.
And that's exactly what I was about to say, is that it's not that I don't think other teams in other regions wouldn't do it, but I'm more confident that an LPL team would do that. And so it makes me wonder if that's just one of the benefits that you get from being an LPL representative, is that you are forced into these aggressive plays more often, and a lot of times aggressive plays pay off. I've always been of the opinion that playing aggressive is a lot better than playing passive, and I think most people are of that opinion, and that was just a good example as to why. But I mean, there's variance. There are times, there's probably some people listening going, well, sometimes you get caught doing Baron and you wipe, and that does happen, but I do believe that more than not, the aggressive play is the better one.
Yeah, a lot of people are kind of on the LPL supremacy train right now. And
Let's get into that a little bit then, because I know you have some thoughts about that, and there were some tweets that went out. So give me some of your thoughts about, well, yeah, just go ahead. I know you have some thoughts. Go for it.
Well, basically, I was a bit taken aback by the amount of comments that I was basically seeing on Twitter after this finals, and basically stating how, oh my gosh, the LPL is the strongest region. They took down the favorites in Damwon. Damwon is not looking so good. And if you look at the LPL playoffs, they were so competitive, and there were all these different teams that were standing up to RNG. FPX is so good, and yada, yada, yada. And I think people are really kind of discounting the rest of the teams in the LCK. And I think specifically that's because the nature of the playoffs and what happened. Basically, every series in the LCK playoffs were 3-0s. At least in the semifinals and in the finals. And in the LPL playoffs, we saw a lot of variance in terms of the series results, the run that RNG made through the losers brackets, and then beating FPX in the finals after they previously got 3-0'd. And I think people are kind of taking that, since Damwon stomped the LCK, the rest of the LCK teams are a huge step below them. And if you look at the LPL, everything was so close that all these teams are on RNG's level. So it's like, holy shit, like we got to be so scared for LPL come Worlds. And I really don't see it that way. And I wanna know you think about that as well. But it's an interesting topic.
I do think you need to be afraid of LPL teams. I just think you still need to be afraid of LCK teams as well. And not to mention LEC teams. Hello. Like, I don't think G2 is going to just lay down and die. I still think Rogue is the best team from that region, despite the fact that, yes, they lost and that we've gone over that variance happened, blah, 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 blah. I don't want to repeat. My point is, I do think the other teams still have good regions. And yes, I will stand up for North America and say that TL is still a good team. I don't think we have more than 2 really good teams in North America, or good teams, let's say. But I just think the other teams are still definitely, they still have a chance. More specifically the LCK, but also the LEC, and then of course the LCS at the bottom of that list, but still chances to take games at Worlds and to go on a run. There is no doubt in my mind that there is going to be more than just one good team coming from the LCK or from the LEC. Like, there's just no way that happens, right?
Yeah, I was
So
looking up a little bit about some of this stuff because this was kind of the topic that I was trying to talk about on Hot Lane League. Because you know, a lot of, as I mentioned before, a lot of people are saying, oh, because Damwon 3-0 this and that. I looked
right,
this up, and since spring split of 2019 in the LCK, every single series except for one, so that would be 5 finals, 2 in summer, 2 in 2019, 2 in 2020, and 1 in 2021. All of them have been 3-0s except for one, which was a 3-1. And I was like pretty surprised just
wow,
to see. And like you think about that, like then go compare the LCK at Worlds. It's not like the LCK has only one good team that they send to Worlds every year. Like, dude, they in 2019 they had like T1, they had Griffin, they had Damwon. In 2020 they had DRX, they had Damwon, they had Gen
yep.
G. Like, these are all really insane teams. And despite a lot of the stompy natures that we see in the LCK playoffs, because I think it's due to the just play style of that region, a lot of these teams are still really, really good. And I think people are really like hyper focusing on the recent playoffs in the LCK and the LPL, and how LCK was very one-sided and LPL was very, very close. And using that to push the narrative that the LPL is so much better and all of these top teams are more closer, I think is completely ridiculous. Because I think, you look at past results, you look at the nature of the LCK, like all these teams are still really insane. Like if I had to pick, the top 4 teams from the LPL and the top 4 teams out of the LCK, like I think all of them would play each other really, really close. I think we'd see something very similar to this kind of series.
That's really interesting. I'm glad you did that research actually, because that to me is very interesting that there's been so many 3-0s over the history over the last couple
I
of
didn't
years.
even look at 2018. Like I'm gonna look up 2018 right now just to see.
Watch it be a freak of freaks, got a bunch of 3-0s, and then they end up going and they get clapped by Cloud9 in the semifinal, or rather in the quarterfinals. That would
3-1
be
in LCK Spring, and in LCK
uh
Summer it was a 3-2. Okay, well, good thing I didn't look up 2018 then.
well, you did now.
I did now.
Anyways, no, I think it's a very interesting point, and I totally agree. I would also say, and it's hard to compare, but I would say that the Dam one that we saw at this tournament was worse than a Dam one that we saw in spring.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, again, it's hard to compare because you're playing different teams in different regions, so that is something to be that's something to state, or at least be aware of. I will still say I have no problem with people saying RNG is the favorite, though. I don't mind that at all, because I do think that there was very competitive playoffs, and then when you see RNG go and take the tournament at MSI, you say, well, maybe FPX could have done that as well, or JDG, or so many teams, right? So I don't mind that. I just think that, to your point, I don't think it's as much of a landslide favorite like some people are suggesting. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, time will tell, right?
And then with the results of this MSI, the LPL they're continuing to get their 4th spot at Worlds, but with the LCK winning Worlds 2020 and them finishing 2nd at MSI 2021, they are now the second best region in terms of like the past performances at international events. So the LCK is now getting a 4th seed, with EU presumably losing their 4th seed. So we're going to now have 4 LCK teams, 4 LPL teams, and 3 EU teams moving into Worlds 2021.
I think that even LEC fans would probably be okay with that. I think they would probably admit that after the top 3 teams, there's a little bit of a fall off. Maybe not. Again, if you guys have any comments on that, feel free to share. But I think that it's probably for the best that it's LPL and LCK sending their 4th seed. I think that makes the tournament a little bit better. I don't just say that because we saw Mad Lions fall apart last year as a 4th seed for the LEC. I say that because I just actually think that the possible 4th seeds from the LCK, whether it be, it might be Hanwha, it might be T1. I mean, it's only time will tell. But the point is that I think that whatever 4th seed it is coming from the LCK will be better than the 4th seed from Europe, and that's the only thing that's different. Another thing I will say is that LGD didn't exactly look amazing as the 4th seed out of China last year either. And so I think that it's cool. The 4th seeds, they all have to go through play-ins, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and so I think that that's fine. I'm happy that it's LPL. I'm happy that it's LCK. Um, I would be absolutely terrified if somehow North America had a really good MSI, like
Yeah, yeah.
when
I
you know
don't even know if that'd be possible because it's based off
with,
of 2 years of like.
yeah, but how afraid, right? Like, oh my god,
Imagine
man.
just imagine like let's just take the top four NA teams from this split. We had Cloud9, Team Liquid, TSM, and we had to send 100 Thieves, like that version of 100 Thieves, and throw them in Worlds. Like it'd be a fucking disaster. The fucking
Yeah,
the Baus FFS disaster.
disaster.
Like oh no no.
Well, and so here's the thing, because there's a lot of people that have said, and I've heard this so many times before over the years, that NA shouldn't even have a third seed. They're not a major region. My question for you, JNT, is would you be upset if NA lost their third seed? And I want to make this clear. This isn't should NA lose their third seed. That's not the question I'm asking. Is would you be upset? For me, I think there are years where I wouldn't be upset, like that year that we sent 100 Thieves. And maybe this year I want to wait and see how TSM looks. But at this current moment, I wouldn't be upset because I would actually be embarrassed to see what the current iteration of TSM would do at Worlds. I would be afraid. Now, again, they can get better. So my opinion on that may change. But at this current moment in time, uh-oh, is what I would say if TSM was going to Worlds. Because I didn't think they looked anything close to TL or C9 in spring playoffs.
Yeah, I guess my answer would be it depends on how Cloud9's doing because it kind of,
Yeah.
at least when they kind of created the whole new system back in 2015 where they made the gauntlet. Cloud9 had qualified for Worlds 3 times in a row in 2015, 2016, and 2017 through the gauntlet. And I don't even remember 2018. Did they get in gauntlet or did they get by on chain? No, they played gauntlet in 2018 as well. So 4 years in a row, Cloud9
Yes,
was the third seed. So, and I think in
almost
most
got beat out by got beat out by Gambit, right? They went to 5 games in 2018. I'm
yeah,
pretty
yeah.
sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeesh.
But
And then they ended up in the semis.
exactly. So it's hard to say because would I be upset? No, because I think historically, I guess I shouldn't say historically. Recently, the NA third seeds have been pretty terrible.
Yeah.
But
That's why I want to say this just to make this clear. That's why I don't think the question is should NA lose their third seed. I don't think they should. I think it's perfectly set up right now. I think the people that say NA isn't a major region and they shouldn't have a third seed, I think they're just wrong. I think it's perfect that the third seed goes into play-ins, and so you make sure that you're not sending a piece of garbage into the group stage. I think that the way they have it right now is perfect.
yeah, I definitely agree that the format that they have it where your North American third seed does go into plans and has to, if the public opinion is that they're not that great of a team, well, then they have to prove it in the playing stage. But one thing
Yeah.
that I do really like about the whole gauntlet format and the third seed is usually, that seed is like one of the teams that is kind of streaking towards the end of the split because it's likely the third seed, obviously didn't have a lot of championship. Well, it's different now because spring split doesn't matter. But at the time, the second seed was normally the team that kind of had like a decent spring and summer and usually qualified through championship points. Where previously the third seed, most people would argue that the third seed was actually better than the second seed the majority of times, specifically when Cloud9 was making these runs through the gauntlet because they often were, like they would often start off summer split pretty poorly and then continue to get better throughout the rest of the season and have a really great run through the gauntlet and more often than not performed better than both the NA 1 and 2 seeds.
So I'm just maybe remembering this now. I know you'll be able to help me out here. When 100 Thieves went and we had no, were they at number 2 seed the year that we had
Yes.
no confidence? I just remembered that now. That
Yeah.
was that 2018? Was that the same year that Cloud9 was?
Yep.
Or was that a different year? Okay,
Yep.
yeah. So yeah, man, that's a good example of where we need that third seed
But
because
it
to your
was
point,
yeah, like the whole point
they
why
got championship points from spring, right?
exactly the whole reason why people
Yeah.
didn't like that format too much is yes, they finished second in spring 2018 where they lost to Liquid in the finals, but in the summer split they actually finished in 4th place, lost to TSM in the 3rd place match, and qualified, 2nd place through championship points. When I think everybody recognized that they were actually like maybe even the 4th or 5th best team at the time because TSM and Cloud9 were looking so much better. And although 100 Thieves did make it, it made for that really hype gauntlet match where it was basically like which one of Cloud9 or TSM is like not going to go to Worlds for the first time.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. I can't believe that they were actually second seed that year. That was Monka S.
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about the tournament MVP. Let's go back MSI here a little bit. Let's focus on the now because, well, did they even announce a tournament MVP at all?
Yeah, I think it was Gala.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
I'm pretty sure they
Okay.
did.
Who was your tournament MVP?
Jiaohu.
Ah, interesting.
I
I had him in the running. I didn't have him as like I think he was like a third or fourth pick for
I
me.
had mine as Jiaohu, not because I thought he was the best individual player at the tournament, even though he was one of the top individual players, because I think there were better individual players like Canyon, like Gala, and like Showmaker. But I think what he brings to RNG and his style of play is what makes them so good. His ability to play these carry champions in the top lane, absolutely dominate his lane opponent. Pretty much very often we were seeing Jiaohu pretty much solo first tower in top lane with minimal help from his jungle, apart from some like early coordinated tower dives, which would set his opposing lane very far behind in the game. But very often we saw Jiaohu getting first tower, being up a lot of CS in the lane phase, and I think it really unlocked way to do a whole lot. We saw him really pop off early in the stage, and I think with the sort of meta that we got with the AP junglers, it really allowed Jiaohu to pretty much do whatever he wanted in the top lane. Pick the Lucian, pick the Jace. Even like we saw him whip out the Hail of Blades Gnar. He was like one of the few people that was actually running Hail of Blades Gnar at the tournament, was because he was going for like such a lane dominant kind of play style. And he kind of had like his secondary pocket pick, which was Gragas, which he did really well in the finals on. I just thought he was really, really good. I think what he brings to the team in some cases outweighs the individual performances from other players in the tournament.
When you talked about his Gragas, you just gave me the flashback of Captain Flowers yelling, "Holy shit!"
That was hilarious.
Yeah, that was really, really funny, man. How good of a caster is Flowers, man. I absolutely love him. But yeah, it made me think of that when they had Elder buff. He just threw his ulti at him and it just popped I think it was Canyon on Morgana, I think it was.
Well, it was that plus a Kai'Sa W. And it
anyways, it was that was really, really funny. So I like that you mentioned Jiaohu, not because I agree that he was the tournament MVP, but I do think that there is some merit, and I don't think it's given enough. I don't know what the word is, but basically, I think you deserve more notoriety or whatever it is for being able to play flexible and being able to play a bunch of different picks, and I don't think that that's given enough consideration. So I really like that you bring up Jiaohu. For me, I guess who do you think I went with?
Showmaker.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty
because you also
right?
messaged it to me an hour ago.
Oh, true. I forgot about that. Okay, would you have been able to guess it anyways? True, I forgot that I messaged that to you. Would you have known anyways or no?
I don't know, but you can't answer that question now with the previous knowledge. So.
Yeah, it's Showmaker, guys. I think that he's absolutely insane. I thought him and Canyon were kind of an elo hell this tournament as far as their support and top lane goes. I don't think that the series are even close without Showmaker.
I agree.
You could argue the same thing with Canyon. Pardon me?
I agree. I think if Showmaker and Canyon were any other LCK mid jungle, Damwon probably would have lost to Mad Lions.
Yeah, I don't think that the series is close without Showmaker. I think he's an absolute beast. I don't need to talk anymore about Showmaker. People know how much I think this guy is probably the best player in the world right now. So there you go. Let's get into our Popoff and Beansoup, our other awards. Do you want to start or do you want me to start?
You can go first.
So my Popoff is Gala. And mostly because it was between Showmaker and Gala that I went back and forth on who I thought I would give MVP. I thought Gala probably had the better series, maybe than Showmaker in this particular series.
Yes.
But I thought the tournament overall, I thought Showmaker was more valuable overall in the tournament.
Yes.
So maybe if people think I'm crazy for going Showmaker, I would say that, again, the tournament MVP is a full tournament, guys. This series, I thought Gala was the best player. He's insane. We talked a lot about him before on the Kai'Sa. He could play whatever. Well, I mean, I guess he could play whatever. We didn't really see him play much outside of the Kai'Sa and the Tristana, but he popped off on both and often. Like, he was really, really good. Going in on the Kai'Sa 1v5 in some plays just to find a pick. Like, that guy has balls, and yeah, he's really good. So I thought that he deserved an award, Popoff award.
I gave my Popoff, wanted to show some love for one of the losing teams. I gave it to Carzzy and Kaiser. I thought they did have a although, yes, I think in some instances, Beryl and Ghost were kind of running it. I think part of it is that, Mad Lions is capitalizing on those mistakes. I don't think you can completely take the credit away from them. And
Completely agree.
like I did mention, if I thought there was going to be a formula for Mad Lions to pick up a win in this series, it was going to be through bot lane and Carzzy and Kaiser snowballing their leads. I thought Kaiser's Leona was really, really great. I think Carzzy, that Xayah game specifically in game 2, like he was like absolutely 1v9ing when he stole Baron, when he was like basically one-shotting people from 1 HP. I thought they both had a really good series against Damwon, and it was a close series, and I think they were the reason for that.
Yeah. I actually really like that you bring them up because I didn't even consider them, and I did actually think that they had a really good series. So, good point. Beansoup, who disappointed you, JNT?
I'm not going to try to get into like a big long-winded conversation about this because I think it could be. But I'm giving my Beansoup to just like the gameplay meta right now, where it's like objectives, team fight around Dragon, Dragon Soul, Elder Dragon, Baron. Like, I don't know, I just don't like it. I don't like how
You just described League of Legends.
No,
What?
but like
What am I missing here?
I'm just getting bored of like I feel like every game is almost copy paste in terms of like how the game plays out. A team, will trade the first 2 dragons for the first 2 Rift Heralds often. I'm not saying it happens
That
every
I
game,
agree with.
but
I agree with
it
this
pretty much
fucking Resident
happens every
Sleeper.
game. And then if you're the team that prioritized the first 2 Drakes and you roll Cloud Soul, you're super, super sad, and you're most likely pissed because you're probably sacrificing an early gold lead for the 2 first Drakes, and you roll Cloud Soul, and you're like, oh fuck, we got a kind of useless soul. Now we're most likely behind and have to play from behind. And basically all major like team fighting and objectives is all major team fighting is around objectives with Baron and Dragon. I think just with the overall power of these major objectives, it just makes it somewhat like I know what's going to happen when a game goes on. Like, yes, I think laning phase in the early game can be very exciting and be very dynamic in terms of, oh, well, you don't really know what's going to happen then. But from that point on, when it's an even game state, you know that the fights are going to be around objectives because like that's going to be where the game is won and lost. And when one team is just stomping the other, you just know what's going to happen. Like a dragon's going to spawn. You're going to take objective.
We're giving this one.
Like you just kind of know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I do think that like I will be a little bit disappointed if this is just the same kind of meta going into Worlds, because it's getting a little bit stale at this point, for me at least. And maybe other people don't feel that because they like the big bangers around team fights and they like the big banger team fights around objectives. But to me, it's just becoming a little bit too predictable.
So I half agree because I don't see a world where you can really fix that. And I am a guy that likes the big team fights. I just don't think I think to your point, sort of, I think, is that there's too many of them that are like, let's give up this drag, or let's trade for Herald. That's something I've said to you many times before, or I may have even said it on this show. I am not a fan of let's just trade Herald for Dragon. I think the reason why they implemented Herald in the game is so that you can play around top lane. There's a reason to play that side of the map. But what ended up kind of happening is you're just trading Dragon for Herald, and that I hate. I want to see them fight over, and sometimes you do. Sometimes they do fight over Dragon and over Herald. Don't get me wrong, that does happen. I wish it happened more often. But yeah, anyways, like you said, you didn't want to go into a whole long-winded conversation.
Yeah.
Like I said, I half agree with you. My Beansoup was just Beryl and Khan because
The
I think they
griefers.
were the I think they were the reason why we didn't see Damwon play like Damwon, and I don't know what happened because I did watch a fair bit of LCK this spring. I will say I didn't watch all the games, but I did watch a lot. I watched a lot, and these guys looked a lot better in the LCK, and I don't think that their competition is so much weaker in the LCK. So again, I don't know what happened. I just know that I was really disappointed because I thought that these guys were going to be, well, I didn't think that they would be holes in the lineup, and they were very clearly holding this team back. And so that, yeah, I'm still kind of puzzled. I think it will change. I think that these two guys are too good to continue to play like this. But yeah, I can't put my finger on what happened. I just know that it was disappointing to see what was supposed to be the best team in the world come in and kind of like lay an egg, so to speak, when like you have your mid jungle kind of popping off. It just felt like they were really held back. So a little disappointed. Beansoup.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go with the GBAY99 stuff, right?
Yeah.
So
The traitor.
there were so we put in our title like, is GBAY99 an a hater? And kinda not. Where do you fall on this one, JNT? Do you want to read out the tweets first?
Well, I think the tweets very clearly paint that he is a North American hater. I'll read it out right now. As someone who's watched NA League for roughly 10 years now, it's weird how I've started rooting against my own region. At this point, I want NA to fail, and he capitalized I want. So to me, that's like you fucking hate them. Or you hate NA right now. At this point, I want NA to fail, if for nothing else than the embarrassment of the team owners and all these ridiculous decisions they've made to cripple the local scene. That was the main tweet, but I will continue to read out.
Hold on, let's go with that. Let's start with that though, because I don't want to go too there would be too much,
Well,
right? Let's start with that first.
Okay, sure.
No?
Well, I think
there's a lot more to read, man.
There's two more things that I want to read because I think it expands on what he was talking about specifically.
Okay,
what I'll just say
go
is,
ahead.
he said he was replying to somebody, but he just said, "I'm very happy seeing the current LCS teams fail. Seeing teams made up of 3 to 5 imports meant to represent my region choking on the international stage year after year makes me very happy. I'll happily follow and root for the NA local/developmental scene though." And then basically to give his reasons about why he doesn't like it, he said teams don't care about, sign, or develop local players. They instead sign imports who get progressively worse over time after coming to NA. Players simply don't practice as much or hard, and coaches/managers don't care.
So that was the section that made us want to talk about this, guys, because this happened over a week ago now. These tweets were from May 17th, and we saw them, but I didn't see the coaches, managers don't care, or players simply don't practice. That I didn't see until now, and I went, what? But let's go back up to the top part, because where he says, like, as someone watching for NA League for 10 years, blah, 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 I find I'm rooting against my own team. I want NA to fail. I don't think that he just wants NA to fail altogether. And that's why I say I don't know if he's actually a hater. He wants to see NA succeed, but he wants to see them succeed with NA talent. So he's a little bit of a hater because he's cheering against NA. Which is fine, by the way. Like, I know that sounds like, oh, he's a hater. Like, you're totally allowed to be a hater when it comes to League. I prefer you not be.
I'm not saying
that's fine.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it.
Hate is a strong word, right? There's a difference between hate and being a hater. Hate is like severe, whereas like being a hater is just like you're kind of cheering against that team or region, or in this case. But anyways, so I don't feel like he's 100% hater because he wants to see them succeed just with NA talent. So like in that section, like he's NA stan, you know. But on the other point, like cheering against your own region, like, yeah, he kind of is a hater a little bit. It's hard for me to pinpoint where I fall on the is he a hater question.
Well, it's hard to say because from what I understand, like he said he has a lot of strong opinions about a lot of the North American owners and the decisions that they've made. Whereas you can kind of point, and I think specifically not in this thread, but on other various posts and Reddit threads and Twitter threads, he specifically talked about Cloud9 and their decision making in the past in terms of they've imported a lot of star players who've actually ended up being pretty good. But on the flip side, Cloud9 has been one of the few teams in the LCS that does put a lot of focus into developing good rookies. Like they have a lot of young, like they have Fudge, whom most people didn't really consider as like a top player before MSI, and obviously made a big decision in terms of getting rid of Licorice and putting Fudge in the starting roster. They have Blabber, who's like basically the next great NA talent, we hope. And they have Vulcan, who at the time when he was on Clutch Gaming was considered to be like one of the better like new talents in the LCS at the support position, and obviously has had a big step up since season 10. And I do think that while I think he's a hater, but what I will say is I think he's hating more on the owners and the decision making rather than the scene itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that I disagree with here. I still do like GBAY99. I've been pretty, like, you and I have talked a lot about how we love his documentaries.
Yeah,
I just
think
really
there's good content.
I think there's just a lot of there's a sea of bad takes is what I see here.
Yeah.
So one is they ridiculous decisions they've made to cripple the local scene. That's sort of fair, but I don't think it's totally accurate. I wouldn't say they crippled the local scene. I would just say they didn't really do anything to grow the local scene.
Well,
a little bit different there. Not where I.
Well, I think there's two big things when he specifically talks about like crippling the local scene, which I perceive as not investing in your local talent earlier on. Is because I think in the past, before franchising, there was the fear of being a bottom team and getting relegated, because getting relegated basically means that your org is like completely useless now, because a lot of the orgs relied on being in LCS, and we saw a lot of orgs really drop off once they got relegated, or on the flip side, orgs that really grew once they got promoted. And so I think with the fear of getting relegated, that often, teams made that decision to say, hey, we'd rather import a player and spend the money to make sure we keep our LCS spot rather than, going for the more developmental route, but potentially losing our LCS spot because we're going to be a bottom team. And then you flip to after franchising, and there was this huge influx of money. And I think teams they picked the route like, oh, we have all this money now. Now we can just import great players and have the chance of vying for some of the top LCS spots because, a lot of these lower tier teams have more access to money and, able to sign players and whatnot. And we did see the prime example of franchising when you run these rookie talents was Golden Guardians in Season 8, which ran a whole NA roster and was basically the laughingstock of the league for 1 year. So I think my opinion of him saying that they've crippled the local scene, I think is more of orgs kind of took the easy route per se when given the chance because they were scared of getting relegated, and then they had the opportunity to import good players, and that's the route they chose as opposed to going the more developmental route, because when you did go developmental, you basically got memed on for years.
So sure, and that's not even the main problem that I have. Where I'm talking about the takes that I really disagree with, I'll just skip right to it. Then is the part where someone asks him why do you think they're failing so hard? And his point number 3 and 4 are players simply don't practice as much or hard, and then 4 is coaches / managers don't care. Now, first of all, let's start with the coaches and managers one. That's just not true. There's no way you can tell me that the coaches and managers don't care. And even if they didn't, there's no way he would know that. So that's where that's where I'm totally no. I just really hard disagree with that. It could be right. There's no way that he would know that. There's no coaches coming out being like, I don't care, lol, and I ain't gonna work hard. You know what I mean? I just think that that's so unfair. I think that's so unfair to say about managers. I feel like LCS managers see that and are like, wow, I work so hard all the fucking time, and I gotta have this guy come out and just say I don't care when he has no idea about what goes on in scrim rooms and all this stuff. So that's one area where I think he's just straight up wrong. I would need to have a lot of information to convince me otherwise that that's a good take. And the other one is the players simply don't practice as much or hard. Maybe, but again, you don't know that. The reason why I say you don't know that is because there's maybe NA players that are currently slaving so hard to get better, but they're maybe just not getting as good as other regions. I think it is assumed that other regions work harder, and it is very possible that that's the case. But again, he wouldn't know that. He's not in the scrim rooms. He doesn't know how much, I don't know, fucking Damonte is playing solo queue or how much they're scrim. That's not stuff that he's a part of. And so I just don't think that that's fair. While it's possible that he's right, there's no way that he knows. And so to come out and say that, I just don't think is fair. And what I would say, I want to use an analogy here that let's say, I don't know, Blabber. We'll just use 2 guys that went to MSI. Let's say Blabber is really grinding solo queue so hard right now, and so is Elyoya in the LEC. They're both working, putting in just as many hours, playing just as much solo queue, doing just as many scrims. If you're a player from North America, it's the analogy that I want to use is if you're doing a workout and you're doing bench press. In North America, you're bench pressing just the bar, whereas in the LEC, you're bench pressing with some plates on. You know what I mean? Because there's better practice, there's better ping, there's more of a player base, there's all that stuff that people talk about. And that's the way I would compare it, is that you could probably work just as often or just as hard in North America, but the results would be better if you work just as hard in the LEC or the LCK. Again, that's just a theory. But I don't like him coming out and saying players simply don't practice as much or as hard. That's a very big generalization. Maybe a couple players do or don't, and I just don't think that that's fair to generalize that to the whole league, where there's maybe some players that are slaving away right now to get as good as they can at their craft.
Yeah, I think I would assume he's making some sort of assumption based on previous, stories and things that have been said in the past in terms of players not being very motivated or players not maybe taking solo queue or even their careers as seriously as they could be. The example that I will use are the players like Meteos and Xmithy, who were never, in the latter part of their careers, they were never ones who were always grinding 24/7. They were just more of they know the game well and they play. And I would assume he's making some sort of generalization about, other players or other instances in the past on the present, which, as I would agree with you, that doesn't make any sense because you can't really compare those players to this new gen of players. And even I think the top teams are the teams that work even harder than the rest of the league, and that's why they are the top teams. Even though those teams go to international tournaments and they do fail, those teams most likely are the hardest working ones to begin with.
Yeah. So, anyways, like I said, that's the stuff that I really disagree with. Is that I think that he's saying things that there's no way to prove, and so it's kind of conjecture, honestly. And I don't think it's fair, but I do understand his frustrations in that he wants there to be more resources put into developing talent. I think pretty much everyone in North America is on board with that.
Yeah.
That you should be putting more resources in, and I would say that teams are starting to do that. I think they're just doing a little bit late, which is probably why he says these ridiculous decisions they've made to cripple the local scene. That would have to be why he says that. But again, it's the point 3 and 4 that is in the same feed of the initial tweet that I was like, wow, I just really disagree with that, and I just don't think it's fair to say. But anyways, I've said my piece.
Same.
Is that it for topics? You want to get into? Let's do quick news.
Yeah. First up, CV Max. People will remember who CV Max is. He was the former coach of Griffin. Was involved in some pretty wild stuff back in the day. Jamie, you want to refresh people's mind about some of the stuff that was going on with CV Max?
So the main takeaways, I read one of the articles that came out when he was suspended, and the main takeaway is that there was proof of physical abuse, and like that is like, whoa, man. They didn't get into specifics. They're not like, oh, he gave so and so a black eye or what. Like, they're not going to do that.
I don't think that happened, or I wouldn't think that happened.
No, I'm just saying they're not going to get into specifics. But if there's physical abuse going on, like that's a real big problem. And I have no problem with them suspending him. I will say it's probably a little bit early for him to come back already, seeing as I think that was just towards the end of 2019.
It was a year and a half.
I think it's only been I think it's only been a year and a half. Maybe it's not too early to come back, but it's definitely notable, and I thought that it would get more attention than it did, because I didn't even see it until today.
Yeah, but he'll be back coaching DRX. CV Max, when he was in the league, was a really great coach. He was the guy that kind of brought up the whole Griffin roster back in Season 9 with Doran, with Tarzan, with Chovy, with Viper, with Lehens. That was a really great team, and a lot of those players are still really, really good. I think it'll help improve DRX because they did fall off a little bit at the end of the LCK this season.
They did.
And were a pretty decent team in the first half of the round robin. I think if I remember correctly, they were like tied for third in the standings. And by the end of the year, I think they were 9-9. Or by the end of the split, they were 9-9. So I think DRX... They were
very hit or miss. Yeah, they were very hit or miss.
I think they'll definitely be one of those teams contending for the LCK now 4th seed. Them and like Hama Life and T1. We'll have to see how the LCK plays out, and I think him coming back just makes it even more exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that he's an asset for the team, and I hope that he's learned his lesson and that there's no issues with physical abuse, because goddamn, that's pretty extreme. But anyways, what's next?
KeyRay, former Misfits jungler, is joining Schalke for the summer split of LEC. Interestingly enough, they apparently still have Gilius on their roster, so maybe it's like a split time kind of thing going on.
When they got rid of Abadage, you and I talked about it and said, well, there's a good chance that they look to sell some of their other players. And some people said, well, what if they just sell because they were looking to maybe sell their LEC spot at the end of the year. And some people said, well, why don't they just sell the players with the team? And we thought that that's still possible as well. But once they said KeyRay was starting, I thought, oh, okay, they probably just got rid of another player. No, they actually still have Gilius. They just plan on starting KeyRay over him, which is really interesting. Gilius has been very hit and miss. He was a huge part of their Worlds run last year. Their little miracle run. Unfortunately,
almost
it didn't pan
Worlds
out.
run.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out. But he was a really big part of it, where they started off like 0-8 or something, and then they ended up winning like 8 in a row or some crap like that to have a really good. He was a big part of it, and so it's a little bit sad to see a guy that was a big part of why this team has so many fans behind them, because that miracle run got them so many fans. I'm one of them. Like I wanted to see them succeed. I've been cheering for them this split, and I thought that he was okay. He didn't start off so good, but he had an okay season. I didn't think that he was going to be replaced, but I guess they're replacing him. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Next up, Riot released their schedule for the whole Academy season, and interestingly enough, Riot is basically not going to be running the whole Academy amateur system at all, except for only the final week of proving rounds, which is the big sort of finale to the amateur Academy scene, which we saw at the end of spring, where we saw no org end up winning that. But I thought it was very interesting that basically
Yeah.
Riot is delegating the majority of this scene to various tournament operators.
It is interesting. I wonder if maybe Riot's lost so much money on doing the amateur streams for so long because they haven't really had a lot of viewership for it, and maybe they were just sinking too much money into it, and they thought it would be better if they just let a third party run show. I don't know. I just have nothing but theories on this. I'm really interested to see what happens with it though.
Mm-hmm. The world's final date and venue are set. It's happening at the Universide Sports Center on November 6th in Shenzhen. I don't even know if I said that right, but November
I think
6th
you did a good
in
job.
Shenzhen, China.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Like whatever, right? It's like yeah, it's
Yeah.
in a big soccer stadium that
Pretty
it fits
much.
60,000 people.
Yeah.
So cool. Sounds good. I'm expecting a lot out of the world finals this year. There was a lot of stuff they wanted to do last year, but they said they couldn't because of COVID. So my expectations are a little bit higher coming into this year. Let's hope they don't disappoint.
Next up, this was kind of a weird one because it felt like it was on a Twitch clip from Yankos' stream, but it was really unclear if he kind of leaked something or what was going on there. But Yankos said on stream that Nelson, former LPL coach, is joining G2 as their strategic coach. And he kind of was like talking about on stream how Nelson's joining their team, and his whole chat was like spamming leaked, and it was pretty unclear about what was going on there. But should it be true? Nelson, who's a pretty well respected guy in the LPL, he's been on a lot of like the various league content creation side of things, like with I Will Dominate, with Thorin, with LS, and he's a pretty respected guy from what I know.
You can never know with G2 when they're just memeing, man. Like
Yeah.
it's impossible to get a read. Yankos gave it the classic guys, that's not leaked. Doesn't everyone know? Oh, is that leaked? Oh, okay. Like
Yeah.
that happens way too freaking often. And especially G2, like oh, those guys are funny. But anyway.
Next up, Azale and Pastry Time are moving to a contract position at Riot. Basically, they're doing the freelance thing where they have the option of doing some coverage at other events with other organizations. We'll have to see where that leads because from what I know, or at least from recently, like Azale and Pastry Time have really only ever expressed interest in League, as opposed to a few of the other Riot guys who have expressed interest in doing some Valorant stuff like Dash and Riv, and we've seen them do that. So we'll have to see maybe what Azale and Pastry Time get into.
So
Maybe
I
later.
legit asked Travis tonight during hotline, like before the show started, like, what's the difference between contract and freelance? And there is a difference, but as soon as he's like, he was like, I'll ask Mark later. I'm like, cool. And then when he asked Mark later, I had to go take something out of the oven, so I missed the answer. So if
So
if
you
you
got
guys are
nothing
curious,
for us, is what you're saying.
if hold on, yes, but I'm saying if you guys want the answer, it's in Hotline League. It's before they start taking any takes. Unfortunately, I didn't get the answer because I had to go take something out of the oven, which is really poor timing. I was like, God damn it, and I thought I would go back and listen to it, but I didn't have time. So here we are. I got
Next
nothing.
up, the LCS is making some big changes to their whole co-streaming policy and whatnot. They're making it now what's called the Watch Party program, which basically co-streaming is now exclusive to 6 people. Those 6 people being I Will Dominate, LS, Doublelift, Meteos, Sneaky. Who's the other person?
Yasuo. Mo.
Yes, Mo. Yeah, wasn't really expecting that considering how hard co-streaming was kind of popping off in the spring split. Although I do think the way that they're doing it now, with it being exclusive to only these 6 personalities, they were pretty much like the 6 most popular people, and the majority of co-streaming viewers were on one of those 6 channels. But it does kind of suck now that like your other smaller,
Or Trick2G, man.
yeah,
Trick2G was doing it.
yeah, your other like smaller league. Well, Trick2G's not a smaller one, but anybody in the league partner program was able to do co-streaming, and now you can't. It's just those 6 people. So I think what I take away from that is Riot is just basically trying to funnel everybody into those channels.
Yeah, they're getting rid of all the smaller ones, basically saying late a bitch. But
Yeah.
anyways,
Okay.
dude,
Nice.
I actually do feel bad for them in all seriousness. Yeah, I guess he was small as far as a co-streamer is concerned. He's not a small streamer.
Yeah.
But anyway, what's next?
Last up, Diamond Prox, former Gambit jungler, they recently announced that they're no longer, being a part of League of Legends. Gambit is joining Furia, which is a CB LOL team. I have no clue if that team is good or bad, but I know Diamond Prox is all right, so maybe we'll see him at Worlds again.
It's just so weird to me that he's going to be playing in CBLOL, and there's nothing wrong with CBLOL or Diamond Prox. It's just connection I never would have made.
He's an EU kind of guy.
Yeah, yeah. But anyways, hopefully he does well there, and hopefully there's no language barriers and whatnot. I added one of my own, JNT.
Okay.
We kind of talked about it last week, but DeMonte did make a little clip today saying basically like, yes, it is well, and 100 Thieves tweeted out it is official that he's no longer with 100 Thieves, and so he's not going to be playing Academy. There was another take on Hotline tonight about what he should do, and basically he said I can either play for Academy or become a content creator. It looks like he'd rather go the content creator route for now. That doesn't mean he's stuck with that. But anyways, we talked about it last week or 2 weeks ago or something, but it looks like it's a little more official now. So
yeah,
that's where that is. He said that he had options to role swap, but didn't want to do it. Do you want to take a stab at who you think could have asked him to role swap?
I have a guess. What, Golden Guardians?
I think Golden Guardians, yeah. Because they just dropped Newbie, and I think
Chime.
maybe they and they had a history of having success with Who He.
True.
Maybe,
Another former 100 Thieves mid laner.
We're speculating. Let's be honest, we are speculating, but yeah, it looks like he's going to do content creation for now. Wish nothing but the best of luck to him. J&T, anything you want to say or talk about before we close out this episode?
No, I'm tired.
We love you all, guys. We love you all. MSI is over. Next week, we're back to Mondays, just like we did tonight. We're recording on Mondays. We're back to Mondays regularly. Next week is going to be our first show talking about summer and summer split. Yeah, so the LCS is back. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of like, this is nice. I get to go back to normal again. I don't got to wake up super early to watch games. I don't have to be worried about whether NA is going to fail internationally. I'm back in my comfort zone with the LCS starting up again.
Yeah, I'm just glad that we'll be watching League at regular times again.
Yeah, true. And maybe we'll be able to do some more watch parties or viewing parties, whatever the hell they're called, in the Discord, because we won't be all groggly and whatnot in the morning.
Yeah.
So maybe that'll be fun. And maybe we could do some fantasy LCS again. That's fun too. Bunch of good stuff. I'm looking forward to summer. No, I'll win it again.
Nope.
I'm looking forward to summer. It should be fun.
You finished last.
So yeah, this one. I finished first. The one before that. Don't forget it.
I finished second. The other one. I'm second place and first place. You're first place and last place.
Congratulations. My top laner. Dude, how come Fudge wasn't as good? You know what I mean? I had Fudge. Fudge is so good now. What happened? Anyway. My top laner. All right, that's gonna be it for this episode, guys. Remember, be sure to like and subscribe. We love you all as always. We'll see you guys next week. This has been episode 43 of the Clown Fiesta podcast.